100 Years of Cox. You are listening to a podcast by Francis Thompson. This is 100 Years of Cox. I am telling the story of 10 siblings from the Machel Cox family through the letters they wrote to each other. They were born in England between 1868 and 1884. 7 of them lived in England and 3 lived abroad in the colonies. One of the siblings is my great-grandfather. In this episode, I will read 8 letters starting in October 1906. The siblings begin discussing the Times book war, which was a heated discussion about the price of books. Arthur is having a bath installed at Garfield House School, a real bath with plumbing. Vera is playing hockey for Kent, and it won't be long before she gets a place in the England team as well. Father is writing anonymous letters to the Times, and Edmund is working out anagrams and has decided on Vacabed. First letter, Bernard's letter. Sydenham, Monday 15th of October 1906. Dear family, the budget has now completed its first round and in very good time too. I sent it off on September 19th and received it back on October 11th. I think it's most interesting and instructive. When I wrote last, Avice had just returned to Hertford. Well, she's just done the same again. She came home on Thursday evening in good repair and started by letting off steam for an hour or so about going to Folkestone. She's very disgusted, as her employers have decided they're going to stop at an hotel. However, after her first indignant outburst, she calmed down and has been angelic ever since. Another stock of clothes has been laid in, but I will spare you any description this time. Mother and father are both away. Mother is at Spondon with cousin Ellen, and father is at Dorking with Uncle Edward. The budget baby and I are therefore alone today. She's very industrious, darning stockings and doing the wash. Arthur, your stag hunting was most exciting. You must have been as active as mother's dogs. Mother was describing the hunting to Mr. Harry Hill. Mother describes him as Harry Ill. Some of the visitors bring down their regular hunters with them, but the natives are rather contemptuous of them and say that what are really wanted are horses that are used to the countryside and when necessary will sit down on their haunches and slide like dogs. I was sorry to hear of Arthur's and Cuthbert's ick boys. There is evidently ickness in the air. To our great astonishment, the other evening, father suddenly came out with the following poem. Hasten, hasten, fetch the basin. Quick, quick, I'm going to be sick. He then informed us that it was one of Aunt Kitty's favourite rhymes. The joke of the thing, at least it seems to be a joke according to the family taste, was that he was taken ill that very night and omitted. Enough of this, I think. Cuthbert, I'm surprised to find there is a subject you know nil of. Whatever did the boy who asked information of you think? It's edifying to note that Arthur knows the proper use of the infinitive and that Avice doesn't. I'm feeling dreadfully nervous over my grammar and style with all the professional teachers eager to criticise. As to books, I agree with Enid that Prisoners is worth reading, but a more disagreeable set of people I never came across. The Life of Froude by Paul is well written and interesting, but I must say that the impression it makes on one while reading it does not last very long. Possibly I am prejudiced against the author, but I think the book rather superficial. The Life of Seymour Vandeleur I have not read. I have an idea that Colonel Max, the author, has been accused of taking some of the descriptive parts in it directly from Winston Churchill's book The River War. I am delighted that The Waves of Fate by E. Noble is appreciated. I feel proud in having introduced him to most of the family. His new book, Fisherman's Hat, I have not yet been able to get. Puck of Pooh's Hill by Rudyard Kipling. Delightful stories for adults as well as children. Avice is going to read them to her chicks. I wonder what you all think of the book war. I was very undecided at first, but now I'm almost entirely on the side of the Times. Perhaps, being a subscriber to the newspaper, I'm rather prejudiced. I am inclined to think the Times will win in the end. The chief objection, to most people's minds, seems to be the American management. But this is, after all, like the so-called antiquated encyclopedia, quite beside the point. Cuthbert, I have got you The Life of Lord Randolph Churchill, written by his son Winston Churchill, for 7 shillings. It really is wonderfully cheap. But the assistant at the Times Book Club told me that it didn't sell at all at a higher price. I don't know which of you read the Times, but the letter signed LLD is father's. I enclose it for your edification. Wilfred adds, it appeared in the Weekly Times, and I read it out here in British Columbia. Even without his name, it was unmistakably father's. Bernard continues, I see that Arthur ends his letter, does woman help? Does he want us to discuss this question? I rather shrink from it. Greetings and goodbye, your brother Bernard. Explanations from this letter. LLD is the abbreviation for Dr. Cox's doctorate-level academic degree. Apparently Dr. Cox often wrote anonymous letters to the newspapers. Someone abstracted this newspaper clipping from the budget, and so it hasn't survived. Ick means sick, and omitted means vomited. Apparently it wasn't the done thing to talk about sickness in polite conversation, to the extent that the first letter was missed off the word. Presumably it wasn't as bad to say ick as it was to say sick. If you don't know, the book war was a heated debate between the Times newspaper and book publishers and authors. The disagreement came about because the Times ran a book club, which was really a lending library. If a subscriber liked a book, they could keep it for a reduced rate instead of returning it. The publishers were unhappy, as the Times readers were basically obtaining new books at a vastly reduced rate. The Times eventually yielded to the publishers in 1908, and subscribers no longer enjoyed the benefit of greatly discounted books. Cuthbert's letter. Number 2, Chapel Street, Berkhamsted, 12th of October, 1906. Dear all the rest of you. Edmund adds, very bad paper, even this red ink shows through. I really must begin by joining in the chorus of congratulations. I think we've made a splendid beginning. I, like Avice, pity the rest of you who live in the town. The country is looking simply grand just now, and the weather is almost perfect. I've only had a fire 3 times, and then on 2 occasions I wished I had not. I agree with Bernard that there is evidently ickness in the air. There has been an epidemic of it here. A small boy in the schoolhouse at 2 o'clock at night chose Miss Robinson's bedroom to be ill in, all over the floor, by mistake, of course. I will forestall Vera's criticism of my play by pleading guilty to a very poor exhibition of football. The Old Boys Club has had no luck at all so far, and we've had 3 good men crocked already. Last week I had to turn out at a moment's notice to keep goal, and as we lost by 1 goal to 7, you can understand it is not my usual place. The school football is going strong, and I get plenty of exercise by playing in 12 o'clock practice games. Here is rather a neat bon mot for you. A certain boy in the junior school here has been a perpetual nuisance for some 2 terms, and has again and again been threatened with expulsion. Well, he finally met his fate the other day, and the head of the junior school told the boy's long-suffering form master the welcome news in these words, Psalm 37, verse 9, which is, and the end of the ungodly is they shall be rooted out at the last. Our senior maths man is supposed to be a genius, and is certainly mad, and the stories of his doings are the chief topic of conversation on the staff. The boys, by the way, call him Bunions because of his extraordinary walk. He's horribly absent-minded and was discovered the other day standing in front of a public house he has to pass on the way to his rooms, busily correcting papers and whistling, quite oblivious of the fact that there was quite a crowd looking on and laughing. Honestly, this is not exaggerated in the least. He is far too awful both in manner and experience to be a schoolmaster, and I hope he won't stop here long. Madame must be rather a quaint old person, Avice. It is very curious that her two heroes should be General Booth and Edward VII. And it is a coincidence that I had the identical couple given to me in an essay the other day as the two men who had done the most for other people in England. Joseph Chamberlain had been written in initially, but crossed out, and Booth's name substituted, I imagine because the boy knew my political opinions. Talking of opinions, I really can't help saying that I think the Times has taken up a hopeless position, and I sincerely hope they will come to grief. This is perhaps ungrateful of me, when I've just got Churchill for 7 shillings out of them, for which many thanks, Bernard. But I can't help it. I have joined Smith's library here, and have read several books, which, although no longer new, are new to me. The Bending of the Twig by Bernard Coke is a book that most of you have probably read. It interested me, but I can't see why the author should consider he has succeeded where both Hill and Hugh Rendell and others have failed. There is just as much overdrawing in his hero as there is in any of the others. By the way, has any school story been written from the master's point of view? It would be quite an interesting change. In the Days of the Comet by H.G. Wells. Punch says this book is intensely interesting and extremely well written. Quite a glowing review, but in my opinion it is one of the dullest books I have read for a long time. The style is very pedantic and stilted, and the man gets more and more didactic in everything he writes. Witness his articles on America's future in the Tribune. I have been going to the Browning Society this term. We have had some very interesting discussions over James Lee's wife, and gold hair and the worst of it. I also strongly recommend to everyone Gilbert Murray's translation of The Trojan Women of Euripides. It is a most beautifully written poem. Enid's prize about family relatives is quite beyond my grasp. I don't even know what relation cousin Arthur is. And as for dear Benjamin, well. I quite agree with Enid's comment on the stag hunt. I can understand father's objections to it, if that sort of thing happens often. Fancy a stag swimming out to sea that far, and still being brought back to the beach. Vera, I am sure you'll be interested to learn that I have just ordered a new suit from a new tailor. The reasons for the change are obvious. It is a perfectly sweet thing in tweed, but I must not begin on this subject as my pen is running dry. My salutations to you all, Cuthbert. P.S. My landlord rides a motor bicycle and shoots game every Saturday, which I then eat on Sunday, and my landlord's wife has short hair. In case you were not keeping up, both Cuthbert and Arthur are schoolmasters at fee-paying boys' schools. Cuthbert works at Berkhamsted, a school in a small town not far from London. Berkhamsted is a school with a long and illustrious history and is still thriving today. Cuthbert will later become headmaster there. Arthur owns a small prep school in Plymouth called Garfield House School. He then bought Mount House School a few years later. Mount House thrived for many decades and quite recently merged with Kelly College in Tavistock in Devon. The new joint school is now called Mount Kelly. Next letter. Arthur, Garfield House School, 23rd of October 1906. Dear family, between us we are becoming mighty wielders of the pen, and it is certainly gratifying to get so much news from all quarters in response to a single effort on one's own part. Enid, I think you are specially to be commended, next to myself, for putting in such a fine contribution. I don't think you can have written such a long letter since you were engaged. By the way, I think when one of the unmarried members of our circle becomes engaged, I think he or she should drop out of the budget for one round without any option to afford the rest of us an opportunity for open discussion of such an interesting topic. The budget baby is very happily self-christened. I hope that her next chapter of accidents will not include any hockey mishaps. Seriously, I recommend insurance against the risk. Father seems to fall down once a month, and most of Sydenham must be familiar with the sight of the prostrate parson. Was this the subject of his LLD letter to the Times? Bertram, of course, has not enclosed it, or it has since been extracted from the budget. It is sporting of him and Cuthbert to take up the cudgel on opposite sides over the book war. This will indeed be entertaining to the rest of us. My own attitude is rather one of benevolent neutrality, with a slight bias against the Times, and a hopeful watchfulness for my proper booty in this falling out of thieves. As to books, it is most interesting to read all the various impressions. The Viper of Milan was certainly an astonishing book for a girl in her teens. My history did not prepare me for the tragic conclusion, and I resented it accordingly. Paul, by E.F. Benson. I expect you will all be reading this. It is very good, as I think all his books are, though his vampire villain is unpleasantly gruesome. The German official account of the Boer War. This interested me tremendously. It is surprisingly impartial, and one gets such a good idea of the proper proportion of various incidents in the campaign. Last night I was out dining with a man called Thursfield. Cyril knows him. This is quite an event, and subsequently my dress clothes get tighter and tighter. Tonight I have resisted the attractions of a convergence of the Teachers' Guild, when a letter will be delivered by the Reverend Ponsonby on altruism and self-culture. Yes, I am taking prep instead. The case of our new boy, Blight, is full of interest, and affords an extraordinary parallel to that of the Gideonites of yore. On the whole, I have not regretted accepting him. He isn't at all a bad chap, and his people pay all right, but there was very deep guile in the job. You know that Mrs. Blight told me that she had only just heard of my name and the school, etc. Well, a week after the boy came, our inquiries elicited various facts about them. She is actually a sister of the Dr. Ryder who lives 2 doors off, and who has a boy whom we have always resolved to reject if any application was made. The mother certainly seemed quite passable, and so is the boy. But I suppose the door is now open to the Ryders, which I don't relish at all. It is a rum business. Mrs. Blight must know that her fraud is detected. I have been to see the cricket between the South Africans and Devon, and it was a very fine match, but a bit spoilt by a heavy and slippery ground. They are a very fine side, and quite capable of winning all their matches with luck. But I thought the New Zealanders a bit more formidable. They play a very hard but quite fair game, and I like the look of most of them. Enid's competition about relations is entirely beyond my powers. The curious feature of our ignorance is that the names all appear to be thoroughly familiar, although we don't actually know who they are. 24th of October. I had a classical gem this afternoon from young Froude, who is beginning the Latin language and has the vaguest ideas of parts of speech. He had to translate Hasta volat, the spear flies, and after much pondering he hazarded, he spears the fly. Everybody will be interested to hear that the bath is actually being put in, hot water and all, and promises very well. There have been developments thick and fast over it. The latest one was that arrangements were made by Goldsmith. He is the present captain of the Cambridge boat and was an old Garfield House boy. Well, his idea was to have the bath put in Moore's room instead of the present bathroom. I had not been told a word, till quite casually I was informed that the workmen were coming in today for the purpose. However, I scotched that idea pretty quick. A bath is a great novelty, and I eagerly await being able to try it out. On Monday I was in the playground, when word was brought that 2 ladies had called and asked for me. I sent the servant to say I was not at home, unless I was specially wanted, as the house was upside down. However, it turned out that it was actually the old landlady herself. She had never set foot in here before, I think. She is an awful old skinflint. May I suggest, with a certain amount of respect, that a typewriter should figure on Cuthbert's list for Christmas? I'm not without blame myself, but I do draw the line at the miserable stuff that Cuthbert treats us to. Have I expressed myself clearly, as well as kindly? Also, foreign paper, unless it is of a very good sort like this, is an abomination. This paper is 8p a packet at the Army and Navy stores. This afternoon some parents, Mr. and Mrs. Teep, were here and were commenting on the ability of one of the boys, saying they supposed it was because he had been taught so well. Unthinkingly, I replied that it was partly that, but that of course both parents were so clever. Mr. T took this as a reflection upon himself, and at once rejoined with, "Well, I always think that it isn't the father's brains that count, but it all depends on whether the mother is intellectual or not." And this was said with the utmost gravity. I should explain that their boy is not intellectual in the slightest. I certainly think that contributions to the budget from our foreign readers would not be amiss. However, the rules must be made clear. It would be treason for them to comment on the budget in a letter to Mother, who is supposed only to be favoured with a few carefully selected tidbits. Vera adds, "Mother sees all, but Dad does not." Back to Arthur. Aldwin will like to hear that his bicycle, which he left with me, is going strong and behaves very sensibly. We have a hot fire this evening, though it is quite unnecessary, and I expect to fall a victim to the sleeping sickness before another half hour is up. Yours fraternally and otherwise, Arthur. P.S. I hope the budget baby will tell of her hockey deeds, and please do send me Ladies' Field, to be returned by Mary. If you don't know much about South African politics, the Second Boer War was fought from 1899 to 1902. The issues were due to the influence of the British Empire in South Africa, along with gold and diamond mining. Neville, one of the siblings, lives in South Africa, and he fought in this war as a white Englishman. So this is a topic of great interest for the family, and in Neville's and Aldwin's later letters, the issue of mining in Africa and the relationships between whites and native Africans come up quite frequently. Next letter from Dorothy, sent from the Ship Inn, Porlock Weir, 25th of October 1906. Dear in-laws, that sounds as though I don't like you. Such is not the case, however, so don't be distressed. I feel much privileged to be allowed to read your delightful letters, and wish that I could contribute at the same length. The criticisms on books are very interesting. I find it a nice change being here, and as Mr. Perkins has taken the bedroom window right out for me, I don't find it stuffy. My health improves, and I am much obliged to Mother for her suggestion of phosphorine, which I am now taking regularly. There are no summer visitors now, and the place is very quiet. It must have been desperately hot here in summer, but now it is very pleasant. Enid's news of her family interested me. We don't have much news of Christopher, except that he is very well and grows and grows. He walked 4 miles from Hovingham to Terrington the other day, so he must be very fit. Love to all, Dorothy. A note about Christopher. He is the small son of Arthur and Dorothy, but he lives hundreds of miles away in Terrington near York with Dorothy's family. Apparently Dorothy suffered from tuberculosis for many years, hence the complete removal of her bedroom window from the Ship Inn at Porlock Weir. Her poor health is the reason why her small son is not living with her, and also why she is not often at Garfield House until her health recovers. Vera's letter, Sydenham, 2nd of November 1906. Dear family, Edmund adds in red ink, bad paper. On looking at the first round of the budget, I found that I had, as usual, distinguished myself in some way, i.e. by writing the shortest letter, quality, not quantity. I am afraid with regard to Enid's question of relations, I must, like Cuthbert, plead utter ignorance. I hope that everyone will remember to return their old letters to me as they take them out. So far Cuthbert is a delinquent, but I do hope it is coming. It was very nice to have a letter from Dorothy this time. In spite of paper and handwriting, I thought Cuthbert's letter was very interesting, though I think it was very low of him to abstract father's letter. I suppose he thought it was so good that it might convert all the family to the Times, if it was allowed to go round, hence the abstraction. I am enjoying hockey this season very much, especially as I think I have improved. The Kent trial match is on the 14th. I do hope I shall get in again. Last Monday, Kent played Tunbridge Wells, winning 8-2. The only drawback to the outing was that I bought a very nice knitted brown silk tie in the town afterwards, and when I came to look at it next day in daylight, I found it was not brown, but actually a light crushed strawberry colour. Atalanta played Beckenham yesterday, winning 6-3, so we have started our season well. Arthur, there won't be anything in the ladies' field until the county matches start, and then if there are any good photographs, I will let you have them if you promise to return them. I'm going down to Folkestone next Wednesday to stop with Avice for the night. Atalanta are playing 2 matches against Folkestone ladies, and I'm looking forward both to the hockey and seeing Avice. Alas, the house is once more divided against itself, this time on 2 separate subjects. Number 1, the Times book war, Mother versus the rest. Rather a walkover for the rest, though Mother fights gallantly, but the odds are too much for her. Number 2, borough elections, turning principally on whether trams are needed in Sydenham. Father versus the rest. Another easy victory for the rest, though an unpleasant game marred by a good deal of feeling. The chief result is that there are 2 more tabooed subjects to be added to the list of teeth, toes, food, illness, mother's hair, father's shins, etc., etc. Father is thinking of boycotting his publishers in connection with the book war, and is hopeful that he will ruin them by refusing to write any more books to be published. He is also thinking of giving up going to church, as all the clergymen near here are not in favour of the trams. It is no good me putting down books, as they are all much the same as Bernard's, and I scarcely feel intellectual enough to criticise them. Mother, as usual, has lost her library book, so I must end this as I've got to go and look for it. Love to all, Vera. Edmund's letter. Woolly Moor, 9th of November, 1906. Dear Vacabed, get your nutcrackers out and solve the above. I must congratulate you all on your latest addition to the circulation of the budget. I must venture to add a sheet on which may be recorded the dates of the various arrivals and departures of the family budget. It may serve as a slight stimulus. I really must state that this budget has greatly added to all my anxieties. I have been terribly harassed as to whether I should be obliged to part with it without being able to add to its weight, etc. I wonder if any of you have noted how long it takes you to read through the whole lot of letters. I think you'll be surprised if you do. Now, to join in the criticism. I quite agree with Vera that quality, not quantity, is what is desired, but it is very hard to attain. Also, it is important that light foreign paper should not be used. You will note I have added my protest, with red ink, where needed. Poor Cuthbert does come in for a large share of abuse for his handwriting, and I agree with a lot of it, but what about glass houses? I hope I have offended no one by venturing to underline in red ink all those words that I found any difficulty in reading in anybody's letter. If we all did it, it might be rather interesting to note the accumulation of red lines. For the benefit of Avice, I must add that my old bicycle also runs splendidly now when I am going downhill and am not too choked up with mud. I must also take this opportunity of reminding Vacabed that I am no longer one of the town dwellers, but am getting decidedly rural. We were threshing here last week, and occasionally I help Farmer Ellis. We are really having the most beautiful weather since I have been here, about a month now. In reply to Enid's challenge about relatives, I resign, as I believe everyone will. May I ask her what relation she is to John Smith? The best book I have come across for a long time is Sir Nigel by Arthur Conan Doyle, which is being published in chapters in the Strand magazine. I think I can cap Cuthbert's story of absent-mindedness. The Reverend Tomlinson, curate of Long Eaton, was walking along the edge of the pavement, deeply engrossed in his newspaper. A water cart came along and slightly sprinkled the edge of the pavement as well as his boots. He therefore took his umbrella from under his arm, put it up, and walked on to the end of the street before he discovered that it wasn't raining. Arthur's suggestion about the next engaged member of the budget is decidedly amusing. I should certainly like to have seen the budget if it had been in existence at the time of the announcement of my engagement to May so many years ago. Bernard's story of Father's little poem is also amusing. I have certainly myself heard the same poem from Father. I hope Vera's ambition is again realised by this time, and that she has again been invited to play hockey for Kent. My ambition does not quite reach that height, but in spite of my 37 years, I still enjoy a game of football when I can manage it. I am expecting tomorrow to play for St. Lawrence's Football Club, composed of past and present Church Lads Brigade members from Long Eaton. We will play Derby Thornhill in a Midland Amateur Alliance match, which signifies pretty good football. I've also been invited this Saturday to play for Clay Cross Zingari in a league match. I've been here in Clay Cross Parish for about a month now, living on the farm with Mr. and Mrs. Ellis, and about 3 miles from the furthest of the 3 mission churches which I am at present doing my best to look after. They are all in a more or less neglected condition. Not one of them has either a font or a pulpit, and they are all very badly off as regards altar linen. Please allow me to announce that I have arranged for a bazaar to be held in the Clay Cross Town Hall on behalf of a new church room at Dainsmore, which is the largest of my 3 places. There is absolutely no institute of any sort, or a club, or a reading room, even in Clay Cross itself. And at Dainsmore, they've been using their mission church for everything, including teas, entertainments, and dancing. They even let it out for £1 to outsiders for dances. Imagine! Of course, I've put my foot down and stopped this. I'm hoping to arrange for a men's club at the church room, as there is absolutely nowhere for the men to go except the public house. The bazaar is going to be held during the week before Christmas, so anything from any members of the budget will be most acceptable, as I am much afraid of being short of materials. I will pay carriage most gladly. Amongst other things, I have promised a picture postcard stall, so any help here will be greatly appreciated. Perhaps Father will have some he can spare me. Will the next member of the budget who receives this at Sydenham kindly appeal to him on my behalf? Comic cards are also sure to sell like hotcakes, as junior postmen will deliver free any postcards bought at the stall and addressed to anyone in the room. How very useful this budget is. What a lot of begging a chap can do at once. What a lot of letters I may now consider I have written. I have exceedingly comfortable rooms here, also excellent cooking. I have plenty of room here at the farm for visitors, and shall be so pleased to see any or all of the budget members here to pay me a little visit, though of course the summer is the best time to visit. The population of this district is mainly colliers, with some workers from Stanton Ironworks, a few railwaymen, and of course some farmers. The great drawback is the vicar, who is very impossible. However, I am almost independent of him. I must now close my first budget effort. I apologise, but I have no time to read this through to correct any mistakes. Your affectionate brother, Edmund. Avice's letter. Coman's Hotel, Castle Hill Avenue, Folkestone, 18th of November, 1906. Dear family, I've just been writing my student's budget. My year of 1903. We have been discussing the education bill. I know some of the family are interested in my student's budget, and we all discussed it a good deal during the summer at Porlock Weir, and indeed it was my student's budget that gave rise to the family one. This Chinese hymn was given to me by my friend Miss Good. She says it is to be sung very slowly and solemnly to the tune of God Save the King when one is feeling particularly elated. Can't you imagine Aldwyn singing it? Mrs. Brownell had written a very cock-a-hoop letter to our students' budget, and I have advised her to try Miss Good's remedy. I wonder if she will be offended. I will write it down for you here. A little Chinese hymn. O wa ta na, Siam. O wa ta na, Siam. Ah na Siam. O ya sa na, Siam. Ah na sa na, Siam, etc. I must say I am sorry for having kept this budget over time. Edmund, I think it is a good plan having a paper for dates of receiving and sending on the budget. One can spot the delinquents so quickly, one of which will be me. Vera came to Folkestone to visit me and stayed for more than one night. I watched her play hockey on Wednesday afternoon, and she did run fast. And then she played another match on Thursday, and then she stayed till Monday, which was a jolly long time. The stay down here was supposed to pick up our gentle and pleasant Veronica. It was raining nearly all the time, worse luck. Still, we did a good deal. It was such fun. Vera and I sat at a separate little table for lunch and criticised all our neighbours in a most superior way. Still, they are a very queer lot here and have some eccentric manners. There is an elderly spinster called Miss Mitchell, who brings an Aberdeen terrier into the dining room and chains him to the leg of her table for the waiters to jump over. I took Vera on the public motor coach here. We had a walk on the cliffs and went to see the French turbine boat off. I think the teas at the Oriental Cafe were the best of all. We paid 3 visits to it. Edmund, you have criticised the paper we use most severely, but you mustn't write on thick notepaper, as our letters are to be sent abroad to Neville and Aldwyn and Wilfrid, and then the stamps will cost too much. As Burr said, I hated the idea of coming to Anne Hotel. I don't think it is altogether good for the children, as they will get too intimate with the maids and waiters. But it is quite a small hotel, and not at all alarming. Fancy me dining all by myself at a table in the centre of the dining room. I don't feel shy now, and think it a great achievement. Mrs. G's sister-in-law has died after a long illness, and she has gone back to Hereford for the funeral. I and nurse are left in charge of the children here. I think Folkestone is a delightful place, and now the children have bicycles, we can have very jolly rides together. I have got The Voyage of the Discovery by Captain Scott, and I am looking forward to reading it. Mrs. G has kindly paid a subscription to a library here for me. I wish I was able to read a little quicker, as there are so many books that I should like to read. I'm glad you gave us a letter this time, Dorothy. It does seem funny to think of you still there in Porlock. Have you had any high tides? The fisherman said sometimes the sea washed right over the road at the Ship Inn. I think Edmund's corrections were very necessary. I hope my writing is a little better this time. Really, Arthur's writing bothered me almost as much as Cuthbert's. Enid, your letter was splendid. I won't go in for your competition, but as the budget has gone its rounds, am I right in thinking that Charles Eyre is a second cousin? That is all I know. Cuthbert, I think your tale of the mathematical master was lovely. By the by, when do your holidays begin? Edmund, I hope you got the postcards Vera and I sent you from here. I certainly think that your bazaar will be a success. Your farm sounds a delightful place. Now I will stop. I hope this paper is good enough. Your affectionate sister, Avice. Enid's letter. 187 Lodge Lane, Liverpool, 23rd of November, 1906. Dear family, the last budget was so interesting that I have been anxiously anticipating the arrival of the next, so I was delighted to receive a bulging and bulky package. I should suggest stout string in addition next time, or some valuable contributions will undoubtedly be lost. I'm very glad that Edmund has joined our merry band, and I read his letter with much interest. But pray don't listen to his suggestion and curtail your letters. They are much too interesting to be shortened, and I, for one, don't begrudge the time spent in reading them. Cyril and I went up to the Lake District in October. We stayed this time at Ullswater, and were very comfortable at Millcrest's Hotel. I've never seen such magnificent autumn colours, even in the lakes. The bracken on the hills was almost scarlet, and the dark pines intermingled with the yellow and red beeches were just grand. We used to go out directly after breakfast, take sandwiches with us, and get home in time for tea, so we covered a good deal of ground. One day we went up Helvellyn, by Swirl Edge. It really is a climb, and looks a bit alarming as you walk along a narrow edge with a precipice on each side, but it is not really in the least dangerous. We went out with the Ullswater foxhounds on one day. It was magnificent to go riding, but nothing exciting happened. At least it would be very dull reading after Arthur's exciting narrative of the Porlock hunt. Hazel, meanwhile, paid a visit to Preston with Zelie, our French maid. Little Reggie is apparently very naughty with his French maid, and he refuses to speak a word of French. Consequently, they were all amazed at the extent of Hazel's foreign vocabulary. I must tell you a good story about Hazel, who told us one day at lunch that Zelie had met a French lady in the park and had talked to her. I asked if Hazel had understood their conversation, and she replied, "Oh, not quite, but it was very interesting, and they talked so fast. Not like you do, Mummy, when you talk to Zelie." Owen's fate as to Rugby School is still uncertain. If a certain boy passes into Woolwich, then Owen can have his place at Rugby. Otherwise he remains at Lockers Park for another term or two. It is all rather awkward. The cook has returned after 5 weeks' absence, but is still very ickly and requires much medicine and looking after. She is, however, quite devoted to me, so I naturally want to keep her if possible. We went to see Beerbohm Tree acting in The Newcomers at the theatre, and liked it immensely. I did not know Tree could have acted a part like the Colonel, but it was really too sad, and one did not care for the subsidiary characters, nor the liberties that had been taken with the adaptation of the book. Some of you will have seen the peculiar announcement in the Times of the birth, here in Liverpool, of the McCormick twins at the hour of evening prayer. You will be interested to hear that local rumour has christened them Matins and Evensong. But the true names of Joseph and Mary strike one as a little quaint too. I was much surprised at the result of my suggested competition as to some of our extended family. Bernard was so much better than I expected, and all the rest was so much worse. In fact, nowhere. Bernard knew 8 out of the 10 correctly, and I will send him a prize. What a number of books Arthur, Burr and Cuthbert have read between them. I think this sort of library list is one of the most interesting parts of the budget. I should like to go through each criticism, but space forbids, and as Edmund says, quality, not quantity, is needed. Puck of Pooh's Hill by Rudyard Kipling is delightful, but very unoriginal. I think Cuthbert is quite right. I congratulate Vera on once again being selected for the Kent hockey team. And will she please enlighten us as to why any conversation on mother's hair is forbidden? I never knew it was a topic that had to be avoided. We have been much interested in the book war and are both decidedly on the side of the Times. I hope it won't succumb and let others reap the advantage of its gallant fight, for I feel that eventually the publishers will have to climb down, and it would be very hard if meanwhile the Times were beaten. The book club certainly stimulates trade. Of course the Times is not disinterested, but then neither are the publishers, and nor for that matter are the authors. Bernard Shaw's letters have been very amusing and to the point, but I am glad our Bernard is on the right side. I will send Edmund something for his bazaar. By the way, Vacabed is quite beyond me. I have no idea what Edmund is referring to. Farewell, your affectionate sister, Enid. In the next episode of 100 Years of Cox, Berkhamsted School has chickenpox, influenza and whooping cough, and Garfield House School closes early for Christmas due to a severe outbreak of measles. The siblings discuss the correct literary use of the exclamation mark, and we hear how Dr. Cox detests carol singers and delights in chasing them away. We get hockey news from Vera. Meanwhile, the siblings continue the debate as to who has the worst handwriting. You have been listening to 100 Years of Cox. Thank you for listening.